So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Karim Besbes. I joined Ubisoft 2 years ago as a generalist programmer, and I'm currently leading the front-end development of a product called Flair. My colleague Benoit introduced it yesterday in the keynote. Before that, I was working in the aeronautical field as tools developer at CAE Montreal, and it's in where I fall in love with Ext JS. I was also doing freelance web development since 2005.
My name is Sam Imberman, and I'm working on the second of the products, or maybe it was the third that was presented yesterday by our colleague Benoit. That's Portfolio, which is another program that I'm going to show you in just a moment. Before working at Ubisoft, I was doing large, complicated nested UIs and transportation modeling. So we're going to talk. That helps. So we're going to talk a little bit first about the programs that we put together, the apps that we put together, and where they're used, where we're coming from in terms of our own applications within Ubisoft, and a little bit about the technologies that we're basing them on. We're going to then share some of our experiences with Ext JS and some of the hiccups that we've come across along the way, and some of our solutions to them. We're going to have a short section about lessons learned, and then we'll take some questions. So first, to talk a little bit about where we're coming from. I'm not going to belabor the point because you've heard it already, but we're from Ubisoft's Technology Group. So if you will, that's the group within Ubisoft that produces software which is used by Ubisoft. So for example, if you've ever played video games, or how many people here have played shooter games, for example? So the heads-up display, you have to imagine that the heads-up display was made by somebody, and that somebody is our division. We make all kinds of things. Two of the things that we make are these Flair and Portfolio, which were presented yesterday. So we're going to present those, but there's all kinds of stuff happening in the TG. There's also the TGO, which does chat and matchmaking and things like that. So if you will, Flair is a sort of internal YouTube for Ubisoft. So if you can imagine when you're walking through a game level and you encounter a cutscene, so the play stops and you've got videos which happen. Those videos have to go through a review process, and so we send them around the company. And Flair is built in order to send these video cutscenes around, and all kinds of videos, in fact, to be approved and sent around, and you get the idea. Portfolio is a sort of internal Amazon for things that, this is what I like to say, it's a sort of internal Amazon for things that go into games. So if you imagine all of those, during the image yesterday you saw a scene with a table and cars, that table and those cars and all those things had to be developed by artists within the company. And so we had to come up with a system, or we decided we wanted to come up with a system in order to help different game productions share those things, so that we don't have to develop 500 trees every single time there's a new game production. So I'm going to take you on a quick walkthrough. This is Portfolio. So just to give you an idea of how this works, we're going to say I'm looking for a leopard to stick in a game. So I might go to wildlife first. From here, I'll use the faceted search maybe to choose mammals. That didn't get us far enough in, so we're going to type leopard here. So we've got 3 available. We've got previews here, so we can actually spin it around and see if it's something that we might be interested in using. From here, we can go into the details page. So we've got a spinning preview here of this leopard. Artists love to preview things before they take them, of course, it's visual. So we've got that preview. We've got multiple versions, in fact. These versions are for different softwares which happen at different places in the game pipeline. So once I found something I like, I can download it. Easy as pie. So this is Flair, which is the second we're going to talk about. This is another product. This is this is a reviewing type of workflow. So what did I just do? Okay. So we brought in a video. It's processed automatically in the back end. So here's a realistic video that we're going to use in a video game. Uh-oh, we found a bug. So from here, we've got all kinds of reviewing tools which are very useful for people who might want to send comments to other people within the company. Artists and level designers and editorial people. So we're going to make a little bit of a note using paint tools that we've superimposed upon the video itself. We've got stencils and all kinds of drawing goodness. And then we're also going to leave a comment. I think that's what happened. Oh. So we're going to leave a comment now. Also, we've got sophisticated kinds of auto-completion within this text field, so we can actually send comments to interested parties within the organization. So we found a bug. We also have integration with our bug tracker with Jira and all sorts of things. So looking at the two products, I think that there were certain commonalities which I'd like to point out. These are really products for artists and animators. So delivering an experience which was very easy to use is crucial. These are not highly technical people, and they're not people who really want to spend a lot of time learning, going through internal trainings and such. We had to provide a user experience which was every bit on par with something commercial like a YouTube or an Amazon. If people have to go elsewhere, then we basically failed. We don't want to, create a user experience which people are going to, begrudge or not want to use. It was also really important for us to deliver a very similar look and feel between the two products. So, for example, you notice that it was pretty much a very similar UI. One product is purple and one product is orange. I'm not going to get into too much about those colors specifically, but we wanted to make it really clear that these products belong to the same kind of family within Ubisoft and within our division, the TG. Aside from that, though, I think that we were working with a lot of the same kinds of issues that most of you probably are. We have to deliver new features really quickly. We need to be on top of requirements which are given to us. Obviously, resources and time are at a premium. And so for a lot of these reasons, and others besides, we're built on Ext JS. So why Ext JS? It doesn't come from nowhere. One of the things is the browser compatibility, which is great. We also, like everyone, probably like most of this room, is in somewhat locked down enterprise-type environments with specific lists of browsers that they target. We're no exception to that. So we do have people on Chrome, and we have particular versions of IE, mercifully newer ones, but still. We love the data package in Ext.js. We use REST APIs at length. Portfolio uses associations heavily. Routing is crucial for us as well because we are using single-page applications, and so we want to make it very easy to send things back and forth between individuals. Remember, these are collaboration tools. The theming was crucial for us too because we really want to deliver user experiences which look like the professional applications that our artists are used to using. We like the build system and the command tools which develop packages which we place directly into our deployment system. And Flair uses Sencha Architect as well in order to develop views very quickly. So we're also based on a search engine system called Elasticsearch. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about this. Elasticsearch is a document-oriented search engine. So I'll introduce you to what a document looks like in just a moment. But Elasticsearch is a search engine which runs inside a lot of turnkey systems that you're probably already familiar with. Such as, I think, Wikipedia and LinkedIn and a fair number. It's distributed, so it can run across multiple machines in a cluster. It's multi-tenant, so you can have, for example, if we want to have Flair running with multiple productions on those machines, we can do that. So, for example, one of our games, Game A and Game B can share the same systems without sharing the same content, And it's sharded, which is great for redundancy, and it's great for separating chunks of information between different machines. It makes it much more redundant and easy to back up. It's RESTful, so it fits into our existing web APIs. There's a huge plugin community and a huge add-on. There's lots of community support and it's easy to get support and to get help, and there are lots of plugins for it as well. Another thing that is crucial for us is fast aggregations, because pretty much everything that you saw in terms of the facets, these are all aggregations, and we're able to do these things in Elasticsearch faster than we would in a SQL database. The syntax is also pretty easy to understand. I'll show you a document. So I promised you a document. This is an example document which I've stolen from one of our training slides, so thanks. This is just a quick document that we whipped up, which represents one of the games that was produced in our studio. So all of the normal data types that you might expect are here, numbers and dates and times and arrays and such. I also want to show you a query really quickly. So this is another training slide, and you can tell it's a training slide because I took it from our database of fruit, which Ubisoft has. You can see on top in the green, we have a prefix. So we're saying that we want this query to start with the letters P and E. So someone might type in PE, and then under should there, you can see that we have a type of fruit, which is called a drupe. Drupes are the fruit which include nectarines and peaches, so you learned something else at this talk. You can see the results on the right in the yellow boxes. So the first one is peach, right, which is a drupe. We've got that information too. And underneath, we have pear, which is a poem. Now, a poem is not a drupe, but that's okay, because you can see we put should there, not must. We also have measures of relevancy. So the first one is, I'm having trouble reading it from here, but 0.433. So that's pretty good relevancy compared to the other one, which is a 0.045 relevancy. So we've got a pretty clear idea of what is better than what in our search results. So another point that I want to make is that you're not going to use Elasticsearch directly with your Ext JS web client. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. First of all, the information that's given back to you is not, Ext wants to work in terms of models and records and such, and you're not going to get that out of a search engine. There's another problem, which is that Elasticsearch doesn't have doesn't have a security system. So you'll have to work that into your Elasticsearch use in some other way, presumably in whatever backend you develop. But Ext.js is good at processing what's coming out of your search results in terms of the massive numbers of search results that you might get, which you'll translate using your business logic to the records and such that Ext does like to show. So this is just a quick schematic view of what our own system looks like. We've got our web client, which is consuming data from our cores. The cores actually have Elasticsearch within them, so to speak. So in the case of Flair, they developed their own backend, their own system, which is a specific Flair backend. In the case of Portfolio, we're using another bespoke product. I could talk about that, but we're talking about the front end. And then beyond that, we have the cloud storage system, which holds all the previews, and which we also have a transformation server farm type thing, which is taking care of generating previews, generating 3D previews, generating assets, and such. So without further ado.
So thank you, Sam. So I'm very, very excited to share with you a few tips about our development experience with Ext JS. So I'll begin with, I will share with you how we use routes to drive views and components. Next, I'll present you our solution to handle URL query strings. Then I will be demonstrating the scheduler and the view model binding. Finally, Sam will share with you the Finally, Sam will share with you his experience with the XTemplates. So since the support of the client-side routing in Ext JS 5, integrating a client-side navigation in an Ext JS application become very, very simple. In Flair in Portfolio, we rely heavily on the Ext routing to render dynamic content. Routes basically controls everything like rendering pages, selecting facet data, active facet data, and more. I'll demonstrate that in a second. By default, Ext JS treats the query string as part of the route name. So to get around that, we overrode the Ext route class's regular expression, so the query string can be accepted without affecting the route name. Our top-level view is a Viewport, border layout type. As you can see on the graphic, in the top bar we have a toolbar set in the North version, And we have a container set in the center region that we use to render our dynamic content. So let's take a look at how this is implemented in the Viewport view controller. So here we have the controller class. We define our route search that is handled by a route handler. The route handler will create our page using the pages, using namespace. And then we call a common rendering method called render main content. The render main content will query the center region of the viewport. Then we remove all the child component and we pass a flag, a true flag. So basically what we're saying here, we're telling the child component to invoke the distro method. And then we add the component, which will be auto-rendered in the viewport. So let's now take a look at the route structure used in Flair and Portfolio. So Portfolio uses what we call GUID in query string generated by Elasticsearch. Flair uses a human-readable format as the data is coming from a user input. The advantage of that, it's short and human-readable, but it requires some sanity check and normalization. So let's see when I browse a Flair route what's going to happen. So as you can see in the URL, we have a query string, we have a keyword, we have a channel name, and we have a facet uploader value. So the keyword will be rendered in the text field, then the facet value will be rendered underneath. We have the store that is going to load all our video based on the query string filters. We have a store for the channels. It's going to be, once the channel store is loaded, the channel will be selected based on the name in the query string. And we have our facets. Also, they use the query string to load the data. So, as you can see, the query string, the views and the stores are reactive to the query string. So to take advantage of that, we need some kind of hyperlink navigation system. So everything should be navigated using hyperlinks. So let's take a look to the uploader term underneath the text field. When I toggle it, the query string should know how to remove the uploader from the query string without affecting all the other values. And generating these hyperlinks can be a nightmare and very hard to maintain. So we saw the need to create a helper class that makes all this handling easy to do. We developed the concept of a query data manager, which is a class that processes a query string and provides an interface to interact with. So let's see this in action. So this is the helper class. We have some statics method. The statics methods are used to create the query data instance. We have a normalized function. This function is used to fold in lowercase no-ASCII character, like a character with accent. This is used for the Elasticsearch purpose. We have some CRUD method for the class methods and a few helpers. So let me bring in my PowerPoint console DevTools. There we go. I spent the whole weekend to integrate the JavaScript engine in PowerPoint. We are Ubisoft, so we should be very creative in our presentations. So here I'm defining a query string, a simple query string. Then I'm creating a query data instance from that query string. Here I'm outputting the data. We have an object with a key peer value, name, the key is the name, and the value is an array containing our query string value. Then here I'm adding adding con to the key name. I'm reassigning the query string to our variable. Then I'm merging two query string to create a new query data instance. So let's move on to view model and binding. Binding is a very, very important concept, and I'm very, very glad that Sancha made it in the framework. When working with binding, you need to be aware of a thing called scheduler. Sorry. So where is a scheduler? A scheduler is like a cron job. It runs every 5 milliseconds by default, and it tracks all the binding instances, and then we'll update or process the dirty ones. What I mean by dirty is when you set a bind value, that bind value will be dirty, so the scheduler will run and give us the data. Because of that 5 milliseconds, we can easily encounter some problems. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here I'm defining a panel with the bind config for the title. This is my view model. I'm setting a default value for the title. So let's test this one. So here I'm creating the panel, and just after that, I'm trying to access the title from the view. So how many of you think that this call will print null? Raise your hand, please. No one? I'm going to print null. So this is because the scheduler did not run when we tried to access to the title. So to get around that, you have to access to the view model of the panel and call the notify method. So if I do get title now, we will have the guest. So let's see another real example that I encountered during the development. So here I have a data view, and I'm binding the store to, I'm binding the store. This is my view model. So here I'm setting a value that is going to be used in the URL of the store. So my store will generate a dynamic URL based on that value. This is my store. I'm setting the auto load to false. I don't want my store to load. So here our URL, and it uses a bind descriptor, the project. So I'm expecting that Flair going to be substituted on that URL. So let me create my data view, and here I'm creating the data view, and the event listener after render, I'm going to add a breakpoint. So when I hit enter, I hit my breakpoint. So let's try to access the URL of that store. So how many of you think that the URL will be generated? How many of you think that this call will output null? Please raise your hand. One? Only one? Exactly. So it's going to output null. To get around that, again, you have to call the notify method of the view model. Thank you.
Thanks, Karim. Thanks. So another thing that comes up a lot when we're talking about web applications which are returning large amounts of heterogeneous search information is the way to display that information. And one good way to do that is by using XTemplates. So we've been using XTemplates a lot because they let us write really expressive, really customizable user experiences without a lot of effort. So I'm sure most of you have encountered these, but the idea is that we've got templated HTML, which is stored inside of a string variable, inside of the application itself. If you've used Sencha Architect will generate large arrays of your XTemplate, which it then will drop inside of the application, and they give you a nice IDE for those. So that's another reason that we've used them. The other thing about X layouts is that they're super lightweight, and they give us full expressiveness with raw CSS. And you've got looping structures which are built right into the system, so it's really easy to create pretty cool things. Just to give you one example, this is something that we did in Flair. This is the details view of a video. So for example, when you click on the edit page, you end up here. And I just highlighted where that table is in green, just to show you very rawly, that's an HTML table right there. We've done some pretty cool things with XTemplates, such as this thing which we call the inline editing extension. So this is an interaction that we've built using XTemplates where when you hover your mouse over that description field, you get a little outline, and when you click on that outline, you're able to go right in and you have your full text editor directly inside your XTemplate. So that's a pretty cool thing that we've done. You can even link with, we've got interactions with link to Jira and to other users and such. Now there are a few problems. One of them is that when you regenerate your XTemplate because the data has changed, you lose your entire XTemplate. So for example, when that pi, the progress indicator, hits 100%, in principle we would want to show the preview that we now have available to us because we've finished processing, right? But we're not able to do that because if we were to refresh that part of the template, we would lose the rest of it too. So instead what we do is we show just 100% progress until you have finished writing your description. And once you've finished writing your description, that's where we refresh the template. So to talk a little bit about interactions within XTemplates, I'm going to use a simpler example with fewer interactions. And this is the rotating preview that you saw in the walkthrough just now. So the idea is that we want to be able to take this fish and we want to be able to drag it left and right. So when I drag left, it rotates toward me, and when I drag right, it rotates away. So that's a video tag under the hood. It could be several things, but this is a video tag. And the idea is that we would want to bind to this video tag in such a way as that we're able to produce that rich user experience that we want to deliver. So this is how it's set up on the page, just really quickly. We've got our view, of course. Inside of that, we've got our XTemplate container. And then somewhere in there, we've got a video tag. So quick DOM refresher. We know that there are two phases for a DOM event, right? So we've got the capture phase, where we're starting basically from the body tag, and we're working our way down to the children, all the way down to the video tag in question, until we get to that video tag, which is called the target. And then from there, we bubble back up, right? So we're dealing with our wider and wider elements back up to the body tag. So the question is, where do we bind? Now, in an ideal world, we'd want to bind directly on the video tag, right? We would want to stick our event listener exactly where the event listener goes. But we have that problem with the fact that we could lose the XTemplate's contents, right? So we have to find another solution, because it's possible that that XTemplate gets regenerated, and then we don't have the listener anymore. So instead, we have to find a binding solution which works on the XTemplate itself. So what we ended up doing was binding to the container, the DOM element, which is the component which contains the tag, the video tag, the target. And so what we're doing is we're binding the mouse move event on the XTemplates container. We're checking out which target fired the event, and if we got the right event from the right element, then we do what we need to do. I also use we have to use the capture phase instead of bubble, because for some reason video tags don't bubble. So in sum, interactions are not necessarily super obvious to develop when you're using XTemplates. You could also, another solution is to use the OnClick. So within a tag itself, you put OnClick equals and then a snippet of JavaScript code. But that's kind of messy, right? Because you have your JavaScript inside your XTemplate, which is an array of strings which contain HTML tags, right? and then you have that inside your Ext layout, and it all gets a little bit overwhelming. So it would be best to find a solution which doesn't involve 5 levels of nested different languages of code. We could somehow rebind events when we're regenerating the template, but I didn't see it. Maybe you guys know. Come find me. Or we can do what we did, which was delegating events to the parent DOM elements in question. So if you're willing to work within these confines, you end up with a system which gives you really absolute flexibility in your layout within your Ext layout. After the presentation yesterday about Angular and React being used as containers for Ext code, we had the reflection, this is almost sort of the opposite, where we can embed anything we want inside of our Ext layouts. There's one other hiccup with XTemplates, which is that it can be pretty difficult to maintain these large chunks of code. Architect does a pretty good job of kind of abstracting that out for you by providing an ability, kind of a nested IDE inside to be able to edit those big XTemplates. But even that is not a full solution because it becomes difficult if you ever move outside of Architect and such. So we had this reflection, well, why not load these templates separately? So we developed something that we called the dynamic template loader. This is another library that we made. So on the top there, where the comment is, you can see that there are 2 script tags. Those are a separate template file. So we've created 2 pretty simple templates right there that just look for 2 datas called hello world and another hello world. And so when we go to create the panels which are going to contain those XTemplates, what we do is we actually we nest those calls inside of a template loader.require. So template loader.require asynchronously fetches our template files, and then we create the panels once we have those files, once we have those calls. And by doing this, we've managed to move a lot of our templates outside of the system entirely, which lets us use our full IDE expressiveness in order to develop more easily our templates. There's one other small thing which I wanted to just sort of point out, which is that our systems are developing or are providing interactions on large heterogeneous types of search information. And so we also need to be able to provide a good UX in terms of the facets, the faceted search, and all of the search queries, as well as the result sets. So to talk only about the result sets and those XTemplates is really only half of the question, because it's also important to us to be able to provide search metadata. And that search metadata only makes sense alongside of the results that it's coming with. So Sencha tends to assume that, or Ext tends to assume that you're going to have one type of data all the way through the system. So you'll have your models, you'll have your stores. One store reaches back to one model with its associations, and then you'll have your proxy. Your proxy calls your endpoint, which delivers one set of data inside of that from that endpoint. Now, we needed a system where we were able to also to take the facets as well. Now, I think that one way we could have done this was associations, but we didn't necessarily need the overhead. We didn't need to ever be able to send facets back. That's read-only information. So it's not really interesting to have all that overhead there too. So we ended up with a solution where we just chain-loaded our facets from the data which is given to us by the same endpoint as the results store. Another hiccup there was that our facets were a tree. And Ext is very opinionated about what a tree looks like and what kinds of data a tree store is willing to take in. So we had to have a process in order to convert from the tree that we had to the tree that we wanted. Remember, we're writing solutions which are used within a broader environment, and we can't necessarily assume that our web clients are going to be the only web clients which will take in the information. So this is pretty simple, and you can barely see. That's supposed to be green, but I'm just demonstrating where leaf is. That's the sort of third chunk, that we generate the data for what constitutes a leaf node. We check if something has children. If it does not have children, and it does not have facets, then we consider it a leaf. So just in sum, shouldn't be too confusing. We get the store we need. We get the data we need from the store's response, the first store's response. We generate the tree, and then we populate the tree store with the root node that we've just generated. So In sum, we've found, I'm sure like many of you, that Ext has been really good for creating very intuitive user interfaces on results sets which are very large and very complicated. I think actually that you might be surprised how similar our use cases are to yours when it gets down to it, or I don't want to say to yours, but to everyone's here. Because we also have to contend with large chunks of information that are very kind of heterogeneous and come from everywhere, and tons of metadata and tons of things inside of it, So it's really not so different. It's just the presentation layer, really. One point that I wanted to make is that search metadata is often as complicated as result data, and it's really important to get that right too. To spend a lot of time in terms of thinking about how users are picking through that data, what facets are going to look like, what queries are going to look like, in the front end as in the back end, and to make those experiences really harmonious. We find that when we use Ext JS for what it's doing really well, and it's usually worth it to massage our data to fit within Ext paradigms, that we've been able to come up with really compelling user interfaces, user experiences really for all kinds of non-technical users. And we're really happy about what we've managed to achieve. So it's been a great pleasure to talk to everyone, and we're happy to open up the stage for some questions if anyone has any. Sure.
And, so you're closing there. You mentioned that, thinking about the search metadata, you want to think about your UI and, how your backend and how it's put together. And I don't want to spend the rest of the QA session discussing that. I'm sure you probably could. Is there any, can you expand on a little bit more, maybe, like your thoughts on some of that? Or?
What would you like me to expand on a little bit more? I'm a little bit confused.
I have a very, very similar problem to you. We manage a lot of media. There's a ton of faceted things. What I have a lot of times is I have users who are doing searches, and everyone's asking for faceted search these days, thank you, Amazon and everybody else in the world. And what ends up happening is the way our data comes back a lot of times, we may have a huge result set, and we're kind of gauging it all into our apps, so we don't actually have all the faceted search metadata, if you will. So I can't give a valid result on the side of the page that says, I have so many things related to this sport, or so many things related to this, things like that. So like the metadata we care about.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that for us, it's been really important to make sure that we got these questions in the design phase instead of the development phase, and to try to think in advance a lot about how users are going to be responding to our system and what kinds of things they're going to want to look at. So in a sense, we have a very user-focused process. I suppose that doesn't really answer your question, but I think that part of it is about really trying to establish, really as early in the process as possible, what is necessary in terms of delivering that kind of faceted experience. But if you can't necessarily deliver facets specifically, then I think that there's still an opportunity there to work within the bounds of the system you have and think, well, going in the head of a user and thinking, if I'm looking for this type of data or this type of data, what are the steps that I would probably want to go through if I were looking at a Amazon or a Pinterest or something? And trying to work from outside of the system and seeing what you can translate in terms of universal concepts like search and facets into whatever you have available to you. It's a little bit hard to answer the question without more context, but we can talk after.
So how do you handle the progress, the download progress that you showed earlier?
Karim?
So yeah, we're using the server-side events to get the progress from our server workers. Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
So the event source. It's the event source that we use for to get the process from the server side. So,
do you poll?
Do you know the server side, the event source? Yeah, it's like the WebSockets, but it's the server side that sends the request to the client. So, yeah.
We're working toward a system which uses Unity Viewer to load, I think they're FBX files.
Yes.
We're generating a specific low-resolution asset preview, which we're eventually going to show in a 3D preview built in, which is powered by Unity. However, it doesn't exist yet. That will have to exist, for us to do that. Right now, we're generating movies. So it's a fake movie, and we actually have systems in the back end which are generating, taking an asset, turning it 1 degree, turning it 1 degree, and so on. So we generate a 360-frame movie, and then we scrub it in front of you. So it's sort of a very convincing illusion. Anything else? Thanks.
Thank you, guys.